Here to discuss all of this is Conservative MP James Sunderland, joining us from down the line. Thanks, James. And in the studio, the Strategy Director for think tank Labour Together, Josh Williams, veteran political journalist and TalkTV International Editor Isabel Oakeshott, and Delta Poll Director Joe Twyman. Thanks all. Let's start with you, James, if you don't mind. Look, the Conservative Party reacted furiously to this poll, putting you 13 points behind. Now, a poll saying you're 27 points behind. What does that feel like as a Conservative, and is Rwanda really going to turn things around if it even gets passed?
Well, good evening, Rosanna. I think that reality depends upon which prism you look through, and there is great variation in the polls at the moment. We are seeing quite big shifts in what they're saying. The MRP poll this week was quite revealing as well. As a member of the government, as a Tory MP, I can only do my best, and that's what I'm doing. As a local constituent, CMP are working really hard, and I think that most of my colleagues are doing the same. But in terms of the macro issues, I think the tide is turning. The plan is working. Inflation's coming down. Interest rates will come down. We've had the legislation through this week on the Rwanda plan. So I'm quite confident this year that fortunes will turn, that the polls will close further, and that actually, come the election itself, I think that the Conservative offer will be very significant indeed.
Before I turn to our panel in the studio, James, after which I'll give you a chance to respond, but you can listen into them, I want to ask you specifically on Rwanda, because Rishi Sunak does seem to be staking absolutely everything on this at the moment. He thinks it really is the will of the people. Do you agree?
To a certain extent, I think that the Rwanda Bill that went through this week needs to be considered in a wider context. And what I mean by that, it is clear Home Office policy to pursue a number of avenues, returns agreements. We've got much closer cooperation with the French now. Look at the boat crossings this year, down by at least a third last year. So I think that the reality is this is just one part of a much wider strategy, and it's clearly working. And my view is that the Rwanda Bill, when it becomes law, will serve as a deterrent. And I think we're going to see the numbers drop right off as soon as the first plane takes off.
Can you really say that it is working when we're still seeing boats coming across the channel? We had deaths in the channel just last week.
Yeah, I mean, the numbers are coming down, so the facts speak for themselves, but people are still coming, and they're coming for different reasons. And what we have to do is make sure that that we disincentivize that. We break the model of the gangs. We need to stop the people trafficking and make it quite clear that you don't claim asylum in the UK when you're already crossing through numerous safe countries. So the idea that people are coming to the UK to claim asylum is nonsense in many cases. That's what they want to do. But the majority of economic migrants, the British people that I speak to, are fed up with it. And it is absolutely right that the Conservative government stops illegal migration.
James, thank you for opening this discussion for us. We will come back to you. We'll turn now to our panel here in the studio that we're listening into that. Once again, joined by Josh Williams from Labour Together, Isabel Oakeshott, international editor here at TalkTV, and Joe Twyman from Delta Poll. If you don't mind, I'm actually going to start with you, Joe, at Delta Poll, because an interesting thing James said there about polls, and it's the prism of reality with which you look at things. What do you make of that?
Well, James is correct that the polls have been showing different things. Some show Labour winning a majority of more than 200. Others are more circumspect and show Labour only winning a majority of just over 100. And so it really depends on which poll you look at to determine just how large the three-figure majority that Labour would win could be if the general election were held at the moment. But if you look at the long-term trends, the picture is potentially even worse for the Conservatives. They have not been ahead in any published poll since December 2021, and they have been behind by at least double digits since September 2022. And so, will the polls close? By historical standards, we would expect that, but will that closure be enough in order to deliver victory for Rishi Sunak? As each day goes by and the days become months and the months become years, it's looking increasingly unlikely.
Well, Isabel, is he right then, Rishi Sunak, to stake everything on migration as the thing that could close those polls in coming months?
Well, it's just a disaster for him. I mean, I thought that the Tory MP there was doing a valiant job of being completely delusional about where his party is at the moment. There is no evidence whatsoever that their so-called strategy is working, and particularly not on immigration. Why? Because the boats are still coming. There is no evidence that the majority of the British people support the Rwanda policy. What they support is a government getting back control of our borders, which they're demonstrably not able to do. They've demonstrably failed to do that. And by focusing on these boats, which in any case, he's not going to be able to stop anytime soon. What Rishi Sunak is trying to do is take the story away from legal migration, the colossal scale of which, 700,000 in the last 12-month period that was measured, is something that absolutely infuriates the people, the very people that Rishi Sunak needs to vote for him and his party. That is a disaster for the Tories, and they can't undo it. It's what they've done.
Now, I know I said I'd speak to the whole panel before going back to James, but Josh, give me a moment, because I do want to come back to you, James, as you were listening in there, because Isabel Oakeshott just levied to you that you were delusional on your thinking about this and the chances for immigration to pull back polling for the Conservatives. Your response to that?
Well, it's the first time I've been called the Conservative MP there and delusional in the same sentence, so thank you for that. What I would say basically is that the government is taking this really seriously. Legal immigration is to be taken seriously, but it's to be considered in line with the cost of living policies, the economic policies. The tide is turning on that. We're seeing prices come down, thank God, with a number of commodities. So I think economically, people will vote this year in terms of what's in their pockets and on the prospects that they believe in. And I will think be quite clear later this year that the Conservative offer will be quite clear. Keir Starmer has no plan whatsoever. We know his track record. We know he's been defending all sorts of people when he was head of the CPS. I think we also know that the country doesn't want a man who has to be told by committee to sing the national anthem. So this is a guy who does not mean the best Britain. And I'm going to be very, very blunt and say Rishi Sunak is absolutely the better candidate and will win the election. OK,
well, that teases up nicely to bring in Josh then on those points that James Sunderland MP made about Keir Starmer. That very much chimes with the attack ads we've seen from the Conservatives this week. Do you think they will be effective, the Conservatives, in what they're trying to, in the way they are presenting Keir Starmer?
Well, I might just start by saying prism of reality was a nice phrase. I'm not quite sure what prism James is looking through, what prism of reality he's looking through to get to his view of the electorate and the world today. I don't think the attacks on Keir Starmer are going to work. I think it is very clear that Keir Starmer is a more popular candidate for Prime Minister than Rishi Sunak is. And the idea that he's not patriotic is frankly ridiculous. This is a man who has devoted his life to public service. He ran the Crown Prosecution Service. He worked in Northern Ireland, setting up the police service of Northern Ireland. This is not a man who needs to be told to sing the national anthem.
Don't you think Labour are really vulnerable on immigration, though? Because they don't really have a story to tell. I mean, the truth is your party actually wants effectively open borders.
So the Labour Party does not want open borders. I don't think that the Labour Party is weak on immigration. It used to be the case that the Conservatives were always ahead on the issue of immigration. Right now, the Labour Party lead pretty comfortably on immigration and have done for a long time. So I think people are looking at these two parties thinking, yes, this is a serious issue, both legal migration and asylum. Who do I trust more on it? And I think they trust Labour more.
I think this is why I asked you the question about whether the smear campaign or the attack ads will be successful, because Isabel asking you there, or saying that Labour is the party of open borders, suggests that the message has not been made loud and clear that Labour isn't, if that is in fact the case, that they are not, because Isabel's a political journalist and still sees that Labour does, is trying to get open borders. I mean, how do you turn that message around?
Well, I think Labour has a pretty clear position on migration. We've talked before on this show about the 5-point plan. Labour believes that by smashing the criminal gangs, by setting up a returns agreement that involves some resettlement of people with existing links to the United Kingdom, will deal with the issue of illegal migration in a much more sensible, serious way than the Rwanda plan, which, even if it gets through Parliament, it looks like it's only going to deal with a few hundred, maybe 1,000 asylum seekers. If that's supposed to be a deterrent, I really don't see how it works.
What about legal migration? How much of that do you want?
I mean,
there you go, that's it, silence, that's what happens.
Isabel, give him a second to respond.
Legal migration, I mean,
also,
the Labour principle on legal migration is that, there are jobs that right now are being served by migrants from abroad, but they should be taken by people who are British-born, but right now we're not training people up to do the jobs that we need to do. So there has to be a serious investment in skills. And also, we've got so many people stuck on NHS waiting lists, not working, And that means that we're not able to fill the jobs that are there. And so as a result of catastrophic failures in this government, in the NHS, the economy more broadly, skills, you end up over-reliant on legal migration. I don't think that's a Labour problem. I think that's a Conservative problem.
I want to come back to Joe and talk about the importance of migration to the voting public. When you're looking at your polls, are the Conservatives making the right move here and staking everything on this?
Well, in a political sense, in a strategic sense, you could say that they are following the advice of the great philosopher John Bon Jovi, who said, you live for the fight when that's all that you've got. When you ask the public, what are the most important issues facing the country? What are the most important issues facing you and your family? The subject that comes top by some distance is the cost of living. The Conservatives are well behind on that by some distance. Next is the NHS. Conservatives are 24 points behind Labour on that. Then you have the economy generally. Again, the Conservatives are well behind and have been well behind for some time. And so the next level, the third tier of issues, is led by immigration. And yes, it's close between the two main parties, but Labour are slightly ahead. And so that is an opportunity for the government, they believe, to emphasise a difference between the two main parties. And they also think it will help galvanise different groups within the electorate. But the fact remains that there are vanishingly few people out there who said, I used to vote Conservative, but I stopped because my bills for heating have soared, my mortgage has gone up massively. But now that Rishi Sunak's doing something about small boats, I'm back voting Conservative. Those people just aren't out there in anything like the kind of numbers that would be needed to close what remains an enormous gap between the parties.
Fascinating stuff. Let's get back out to James Sunderland MP, who's listening to all of that. When you hear that analysis about the polls and what voters are looking for, and the Conservatives were traditionally always the party of finances and the economy, but clearly the public don't feel that you're delivering on that.
Well, so much to say. I mean, I think that the first point I'd make in response is the fact that Labour has no plan on migration at all. And actually, the comments that were made by the journalist earlier were really significant, because everything that he listed, the Conservatives are actually doing already, as Fleur Anderson admitted yesterday in the chamber for those that were listening. But the second thing is that the Conservatives are the party of the economy, and current policies are working to the point where we know that inflation's coming down, the economy is still growing. We've got more people in work than ever before, wages are going up. So the picture in terms of what's ahead of us is really quite attractive and rosy. So I can say with confidence that we'll win on the economy. But the third point, and the key point for me, is this: at some point, Keir Starmer's going to have to come out and write a manifesto. What is his plan? What's he going to do? How is he going to change from or deviate from current policy? At the moment, he's ahead in the polls by doing precisely nothing except sitting on the fence. So in my view, right now, it's Labour's to lose. And I think that the polls will close and the Conservative government will be more than successful this year.
Oh, once again, prisms of reality, if I can use your term. Look, I want to pose that back to Josh then, who's sitting here representing Labour for us from think tank Labour Together. Starmer not having a manifesto, not having a clear plan. We've tasked you enough on migration, but in terms of Starmer at large, James Sunderland there saying he's just sitting there kind of resting on his laurels.
I think that's totally wrong. I think that in opposition, this Labour Party has set out a much clearer set of ideas about what it wants to achieve for Britain than I've ever seen from an opposition party. So people don't take the missions as seriously as I think they should take them. The missions do set out a plan for government that is what Keir called a decade of national renewal. This is a very serious set of ambitions for Britain: growing the economy, fixing the NHS, dealing with the fact that our education system is a mess. Yeah, numbers are a little bit better today, but it's not in a good place. And how do you do that? A big part of that is the fact that Labour believes that you need to invest in Britain again. Investment in Britain, both public and private, is catastrophically low right now. That is what is holding us back. We need to invest in Britain again so we can grow our economy. And by doing that, we will have the money that is going to allow us to deal with the huge problems that we face, whether that's the NHS, education, crime, so on.
Look, I think this is a conversation we're going to keep having a lot more in the coming months, whether it be 3, 6 or 9. But we appreciate you all this evening. Josh, Joe and Isabel here in the studio, and James Sunderland MP down the line. Thank you.